Happy Sabbath, everybody. Today, April the 24th, 2021, I advance in series of 45, entitled Hearken. 5 studies in this series have been given already. This Sabbath afternoon, the 6th, which is called Land of Oblivion, will be added to the series. Land. Our land, proverbially, is the mental parameters which confine us. And Webster defines obliviousness as a mind that, quote, lacks active conscious knowledge or awareness, close quote. Even saints walk in this paradigm. Thus, though one be deemed righteous, they still require shock therapy to evoke spiritual awareness. Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist, lived in a time like that of our own, a time of transition. Therefore, even before our central text is cited, before I take your attention to Psalms chapter 45, let me paraphrase Zacharias' experience with Oblivion that we may learn. Just as when someone creeps up on you, Gabriel out of nowhere appeared unto Zacharias as he alone was performing the priestly function of incense. Zacharias was oblivious to seventh seal theology. That is, the offering of incense answers the prayers of the saints. So he wasn't expecting an answer to his long, age-old prayer. Yet by Gabriel's unannounced visit, Zacharias, devoid of extrasensory perception, nearly had a cardiac arrest. Christ, on the other hand, used a different style of approach. Remember when Adam and Eve were hiding in the garden? Christ called out to them. Remember when he appeared unto Abraham? Abraham was able to see him afar off. Therefore, he didn't undergo any cardiac shock. Remember Moses? He spoke to Moses from the burning bush. Don't you just love the righteousness of Christ? But Gabriel, oblivious to human sensitivities, just dramatically materialized. There's more. Both Zacharias and his spouse Elizabeth, after years of praying, were old and barren. As a result, Zacharias expressed doubt in Gabriel's promise. The scriptures note the following record. Luke chapter 1, verse 5. There was a priest named Zacharias and his wife Elizabeth, and they were both righteous. Did you hear that? You know anybody that can be defined by the Bible as such? It says they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blameless. Verse 11, and there appeared unto him an angel. And there appeared unto him an angel on the right side of the altar of incense. And Zacharias was troubled, and fear fell upon him. I remember creeping up on Vanette the other day. She was in the kitchen cutting a roll with a knife. And I just spoke. She nearly cut herself. But the angel said unto him, continued to quote the scriptures, fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard, and thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. Verse 18, Zacharias said unto the angel, whereby shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife well stricken in years. And the angel answering said unto him, I am Gabriel, that standeth in the presence of God. And I am sent to speak unto thee, and to show thee these glad tidings. And behold, thou shalt be dumb, and not able to speak, until the day that these things shall be performed. Because thou believest not my words, which shall be fulfilled in their season. We're describing to you here an Old Testament transition period. After decades of prayer, Zacharias, suffering from the debility of age, must have assumed that, understandably, God denied his prayer for a child. Thus, Father sent Gabriel. But Gabriel capriciously punished a righteous man with the horrible affliction of mutism because he was oblivious. Now, let me ask you a question here. How was Zacharias supposed to know Gabriel's standing? How was he supposed to know his name? We humans, those of us that are righteous, we try the spirits. But Zacharias didn't know Gabriel nor his credentials. Can Gabriel lead a church to salvation? We must ask. Gabriel's deportment offends me. It doesn't seem fair. But God sent him. Can we therefore judge Gabriel? Let me take you to John chapter 12, and let's read verse 44. Jesus cried and said, He that believeth on me, believeth not on me, but on him that sent me. And he that seeth me, seeth him that sent me. There goes an application of what we're studying about already. Because Christ appeared to them through the flesh of Jesus, that he wouldn't be offensive. Then he continues in verse 46, I am come a light into the world, that whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. And if any man hear my words and believeth not, I judge him not. This is the righteousness of Christ. He delivered his word, and those who mocked and jeered against him, he didn't even pass judgment on them. If any man hear my words and believe not, I judge him not. For I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. We know how we get salvation now, don't we? By the Lord's word. But he continues, He that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. For I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. And I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Whatsoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak. I tell you that we're living in a day of a different paradigm. Our power to know the name of the Lord and to distinguish him not only shows his differences between the Comforter, between Jesus and Father, but there's no other being out there that can exhibit his meekness and his righteousness. But yet and still, if he's not here present and representing himself to you, then you may have an emissary that is not as forbearing. But our question is, can we judge Gabriel? Matthew chapter 16, verses 17 through 19 gives us insight. And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock will I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Do you understand what that means? Access to the door, it comes through Peter. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, Matthew chapter 16, verse 16 through 19. So if Peter binds on earth a medium to communicate to people respecting their sensibility, then that is the vehicle of communication that heaven will honor. Peter, herein, used as an effigy, a double entendre, symbolized he who was to have the keys of the kingdom. His replica, the son of David, a man uncorrupted by hell, was to be authorized to therein define Christ's righteousness. Evidently, Gabriel, with his high standing, but devoid of meekness, is accordingly so measured. I take you for additional insight to John chapter 17. Let's read verses 20 through 23. Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. The world is only going to believe the gospel when we are one in Christ. And the glory which thou gavest me. Oh, we got more to say about the glory, because the Father endowed upon Christ much glory. But he says, and the glory which thou gavest me, I have given them, that they may be perfect in one, and that the world may know that thou hast sent me, and hast loved them as thou hast loved me. Okay, so today as we open up these scriptures, and as they become deeper, we understand that Father will have the same devotion and love and appreciation to us that he has for Christ. You can't get closer to Father than Christ, even if 2,000 years ago you stood in his presence. In fact, becoming one in Christ shows that we will embrace his meekness. Remember how in our last study we showed that he preached that unpopular doctrine that you must eat his flesh and drink his blood, and that he had the audacity to connect himself with heaven? I am the bread that cometh down from heaven. I'm the key to your salvation. Well, he refers to that gospel, the testimony that delivered to us, as his blood. And we must consume his flesh and blood. That gives to us our victory over hell. And since none others have so done, then we can assume that though Satan lost in his battle in heaven and was cast to the earth, there are none others in the universe who have embraced the righteousness of Christ so that they can exhibit his meekness. and his righteousness. This is our victory. Making such declarations, though they may sound bold, are our exhibition of that we have consumed the flesh and blood of Christ. Revelation 12, verse 10 and 11 tells us, and I heard a loud voice saying in heaven. See, heaven needs to understand this victory of ours, this preeminence. But they were created lower than the angels. But Father has lifted them up to the standard of Christ. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto death. Therefore, it's no longer an abstract dramatization. It's no longer a statement that can be ignored, that we can, as we read the scriptures, sashay ourselves beyond. It's one that must echo in our hearts. We are honored of the Father by our embrace of Christ's testimony that he spoke through Jesus' lips. John 14, verses 21 through 26. He that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me. And he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father. And I will love him and will manifest myself to him. Judas, not Judas Iscariot, in verse 22, asked, how so? Skipping to verse 23, the Lord gives us the answer. Jesus answered and said unto him, if a man love me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and we will come unto him and make our abode with him. In other words, this abiding presence of Father in Christ has never taken place until now. So now is the time to make recognition of it. And if Gabriel deserved honor and respect because he stood in the presence of God, then we, believing the word that the Lord delivered to us. Remember, he says, he that believeth not my word hath one to judge him. We, by believing these words that Father commanded Christ to reveal to us, we therefore abide in the Father's love. And we stand in the presence of God, giving us the power to judge Gabriel's association and his communications to humanity. He that loveth me not keepeth not my sayings. And the word which ye hear is not mine, but the Father's which sent me. Father said, Christ, go down and talk to them. But they're fearful, frightful people. Well, hide yourself upon the image of Jesus, my only begotten Son. And that way, you can lift them up to my throne. I don't like a lot of things that they think, they say, and they talk about. Some things they say disturb me. That's why I'm not going down. I need somebody in meekness to go down. Somebody that's not going to creep up on them. These things have I spoken unto you, being yet present with you. Therefore, the word that the Lord intends for us to honor are the words that he delivered while he walked with them for 3.5 years. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. And this is why these words have special echo in our minds. This is why they are very important and should not be ignored. Another text that the testimony of Jesus honors, that should not be ignored, is found in Psalms 45. Let me read to you verses 1 through 6. My heart, this is David speaking, my heart is inditing a good matter. I speak of the things which I have made touching the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. In other words, somebody inspired by the Lord to write. Remember, Moses told you by double entendre in Deuteronomy 32 that he will publish the name of the Lord, right? Shortly after that, he passed. Well, this is the day when the ready writer makes record of the path to salvation. This makes reference to my work, the mustard seed advent. Describing my personage, he says, thou art fairer than the children of men. See, some children of men may have not taken umbrage and become fearful about Zacharias' mutism. It's because they didn't understand the concept of fairness. Thou art fairer than the children of men. Grace is poured into thy lips. Therefore, God hath blessed thee forever. You're not God. Matthew chapter 22 and other places tells you that when David refers to the Lord, he's referring to Christ. This ready writer who has grace poured into his lips has been blessed of God forever. You cannot ignore the conclusion, therefore. Like stepping into a steely tooth bear trap, you have to be entangled with the gospel fact that this person is the one whom Father blessed in the Garden of Eden when he blessed Adam and Eve and told them to be fruitful and to multiply. His has to be the one that the Lord referred to when he conveyed the blessing of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob on Jacob's seed. This has to be the blessed one that we're going to read about in 2 Samuel, chapter 7, that is the son of David. Because we know that he says, therefore God hath blessed thee forever. Oh, God knows how to bless, doesn't he? Going forward to verse 3. I know we've been through this text a lot of times, but we haven't deciphered much of it. And today we're not, in our notes, intending to cover much of it as well. There's so much meat in here before we reach some of the other exciting prophecies that we're going to take our time to make sure we masticate it well and correctly. What does David mean? He's telling the ready writer. Indeed, the pen shall be mightier than the sword, but the ready writer is also given a sword. It says, gird thy sword upon thy thigh. Wouldn't it be embarrassing if you were doing battle with the enemy, you reached into the sheath, and there was no sword there? You'd be in big trouble, right? So David says, take precautions. Don't forget your sword. Gird thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty, with thy glory and thy majesty. Now we know how he become majestic and most mighty. We saw from the testimony of Jesus how he becomes one with Christ. And since we are one, we inherit the same blessing. But what is our sword? How is it that we're supposed to gird it to our side? I know some of us think that it's the testimonies, it's the Bible. Let us get greater clarification on what the sword means. Table that question in your minds as we advance in the study. Because we got a little bit more to talk about Christ and Gabriel and the angels. Gird thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty, and with thy glory and thy majesty. And in thy majesty ride prosperously because of truth and meekness and righteousness. Why? Why is he to ride prosperously? Why is he endowed with this blessing from the Father and from the Lord? Because of truth, meekness, and righteousness. Therefore, don't expect other people to inherit this blessing because they may not have meekness or righteousness. They could still have honor in the Lord's kingdom. Look at Gabriel. He stood in the presence of God, right? But the one that is called most mighty, the one whom Christ prayed to be blessed with the glory that the Lord endowed upon Christ, he says, in thy majesty ride prosperously because of truth and meekness and righteousness. And thy right hand shall teach thee terrible things. Now, we've shown through a lot of study that Vinette represents my right hand. I don't have to go through all the media and use my reading capacity to discern all the wickedness and the evil that's gone on in the land. She becomes enthralled with that, sometimes up in the middle of the night researching these things. And then she relays it to me as my right hand. She teaches me terrible things. Thy arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies, whereby the people fall under thee. Now, verse 6 and 7 is a text of most curious interest. Verse 6. Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of thy kingdom is a right scepter. Now, to whom is he referring to? He's referring to Christ. He changes the object of his communication. This is part of this text that we've never understood before. True indeed is E.G. White's acknowledgement that the truth gets deeper and deeper. Thy throne. There's something about Christ's empowerment that David enjoys. O God is forever and ever. The scepter of thy kingdom is a right scepter. That means people that get punished are deserving of their punishment. It's not done unjustly. It's not done out of pride and exaltation. Thou lovest righteousness and hatest wickedness. Thou lovest righteousness and hatest wickedness. Therefore, that's a key conjunctive adverb. Because of this, this is why, accordingly, consequently, therefore, what happens? God, thy God, hath anointed thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. He's talking to Christ. He's telling you that Christ loves righteousness and he hates wickedness. And this is the reason why the Father promoted him above his fellows. Which means that there was a time, they tell me that in Greek the name Christ means anointed. And that in Hebrew the name Jesus means anointed. So there was a time in the annals of the universe, of the universal history, that Christ was equal to his fellows. Think of a professional football team. All of a sudden, the coach reaches in and ordains his star player with the most talent to become quarterback. And you could understand why the running backs and the wide receivers and the defensive and the offensive players may become a little bit jealous. But because Christ loved righteousness and hated wickedness. In other words, Lucifer, why are you talking like a fool? I didn't say that. Oh, Lucifer, he's just being an entertainer. See, these people didn't hate wickedness. Christ did. Therefore, God, the Holy Father now, Christ God, the one to whom he prayed in John chapter 17, hath anointed Christ with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. Therefore, that glory that Father conveyed upon Christ, he asked Father to convey upon us. This is why he made his covenant to David, which we will cover in a second. But this is why the ready writer is promised in John 12, a text cited already, to judge you by his word in the last day. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 11. And since the time that I command the judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also the Lord telleth thee that he will make thee a house. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers. This is going to take place, therefore, after David passes away. It couldn't be referenced to Solomon, because Solomon was ordained before David passed away. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. This is the work that Christ has been doing with the Enochians. He's establishing the kingdom that he promised to the son of ancient David. He shall build an house for my name. Therefore, nobody else could build or erect this house. The Lord promised that David's son was going to build a house to identify the personage of Christ. And that's what we're doing today. We're telling you who he was, how he got anointed, and how he's going to eventually prevail. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. So we're not talking about the same person. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men, and with the stripes of the children of men. But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. Verse 16, and thine house and thine kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. Meaning that in Psalms chapter 45, this is a scripture that is in perfect synergy with 2 Samuel, the text that we just read. Therefore, let us anchor this study with the present truth icon of beauty and perfection, our zenith, that Christ was promoted above others. It gives us more clarity and understanding, doesn't it, when we read in John chapter 5, verses 19, then skipping to verse 30, then verse 20. Then answered Jesus and said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do. For what things soever he doeth, these also doeth the Son likewise. Then he takes it from third person, lest you be confused, and brings it to first person in verse 30. I can of mine own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just. Because I seek not mine own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me. This is the status for his promotion. Father could send other people, but they want to integrate their own will into the mix. Verse 20, for the Father loveth the Son, and showeth him all things that himself doeth. And he will show him greater works than these, that ye may marvel. Christ is not through learning. And since we are to inherit his glory, we are likewise to exhibit the same august empowerment. But you might ask, what about creation? John clearly states credit to Christ, doesn't he? In fact, John chapter 1, verse 1 through 5 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, by Christ, by the Word. And without him was not anything made that was made. And without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. We have a little bit of a conundrum because it shows that Christ actually performed a marvelous miracle. But he performed the miracle within the constraints that we've read about in John chapter 5. That's why the Father was with him. The Father showed him how to do and perform the creation. Irrefutably, undeniably, and without any hope of countervailing rebuttal, David's claims that Christ, by his God, whom we know to be the Father, was anointed above his fellows, even Gabriel. Such is proof that during the great controversy and before our creation, Father showered Christ with dignity, with recognition, and with honor, so as to exalt him, Christ. This was Christ's anointing. This Father did by first showing Christ, like an awe-inspiring firework display, how to create Earth's solar system, Earth and then man. Thus, in the original creation, Father anointed him with special honors that heaven and eventually earth may celebrate him with standing ovation. His laudations is not over. Soon Christ will finish this work of earth's restoration. In this he shall continue to be honored above his fellows. Such empowerment by Father is the declaration of Christ's name. Can you envision Father's got greater things to show him? How does that work apply to us? Was the Lord just exaggerating when he said, endow them with the glory that you had given me? And does not, if he's serious, that endowment exalt us and extol us above the angels? Isaiah chapter 49, verse 1 through 6. Listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from far. The Lord hath called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. And he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me. 20 years ago, you didn't even know he was here around, did you? He was hidden. And said unto me, thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Well, now that is another statement all to itself. Because there's the blessed man that we've made reference to in Isaiah 45 that's going to work to glorify Christ all the more. Consequently, when Father glorified Christ above his fellows, the glorification endowment was not finished. Verse 3, and said unto me, Thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Then I said, I have labored in vain, and have spent my strength for naught. And in vain, yet surely my judgment is with the Lord, and my work with my God. And now saith the Lord that formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob again to him, though Israel be not gathered. Yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. And he said, It is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles. Therefore, when people ignorantly or quick to besmirch the work of the Lord, a lot of people around the globe don't appreciate Christ. Some want to exalt their own beliefs, their own customs and traditions. Well, the Lord has a question for them. The same question that he proffered to Job in chapter 38. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare it if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof? If thou knowest, or whom hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. That's the day of Christ's laudation, his celebration. That's the day when he was recognized by his fellows for his majestic and great work. And that's the day that points to the time when he was, as David put it, honored above his fellows. This proves that Christ was dignified by God through the creation of Earth, the solar system. Celebration and applause exploded for him by the other witnessing sons of God, by creating another space in the universe for our sun, moon, and stars. All other luminaries conceded his grandeur as they fell further in status behind Christ. To boot, Satan was defeated and cast down. All recognized that now he couldn't compare himself to Christ. Thus did Christ ask Job to account for his own whereabouts in this event. Maybe you should ask yourselves that. Where were you? Christ was so honored by God, according to David, because the others did not extol righteousness and meekness, nor did they express hate for Lucifer's wickedness. Their honor of Christ was not the highest form. They so did out of loyalty and rank or magic, but not out of our faith. That's how we overcome them, by the blood of the Lamb. Ergo, Gabriel did not show these qualities of respect for righteousness and meekness of station to Zacharias. But the mustard seed, the Son of Man, being one with Christ, Elijah so honors him and rebukes Gabriel's Oblivion. Yet and still, Gabriel did indeed have his honor. We are told that he inspired Prophet Muhammad. There's no other religion on earth that makes the same claim. We have to give to it accreditation. They didn't say God told me this. They said Gabriel brought this light to Prophet Muhammad. And we give Gabriel credit for that. How then can he be diminished now in this hour? We need to explore a little further. But lest you become offended by crediting Prophet Muhammad's claim as being sourced by Gabriel, let me also suggest to you that even though Muhammad was not of Hebrew extraction, neither was Luke. Luke was given the inspired story of the engenderation of John the Baptist and of Jesus. He communicated to Zacharias and to Mary. How is it that we can validate Luke? Luke was a Gentile. But what Luke's validation is that he gathered all of the disciples and made a record of their testimony so that in so doing, we can today celebrate their word. We can today celebrate the Lord's word through Luke's inspired and dedicated licensed right. If you're confused about that point, let us revert back to John chapter 17. Christ prayed this prayer at the close of his work. Verse 1, then these words spake Jesus and lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour is come. Glorify thy Son, that thy Son may also glorify thee. So we know this is Christ because he's asking the Holy Father to glorify Jesus. He mentions the disciples. Verse 7, now these have known that all things whatsoever thou hast given me are of thee. For I have given unto them the words which thou gavest me, and they have received them, and have known surely that I came out from thee, and they have believed that thou didst send me. Now John was an original disciple. So was Matthew. But you don't hear anything about many of the other disciples. They've given no other testimony. But instead you do, because Luke made a faithful record of the entirety of the gospel. And he did so by the pen of inspiration. So that, verse 20, the Lord says, verse 20, because beforehand he prayed solely for the 11 disciples. Now he says, neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word. Therefore, if Luke conveys the engenderation of Jesus and spoke to Mary about such a conveyance, and she being tied with one of the 120, then that's a record that is worthy of our faith and of our belief. Luke shows you, therefore, that you can receive record of faithfulness indirectly and still be honored of heaven. Muhammad received word indirectly from Gabriel, and we give him credit. And I'll show you more validation of his not divine inspiration, but of his inspiration by Gabriel. Bearing in mind that I'm not too impressed with Gabriel's meekness or with his commitment to righteousness. I think a righteous man like Zacharias should have been given much more honor and respect. Let me take you to Genesis chapter 27, 29 and 30. And we'll see here, if I can give you a preliminary insight, that Isaac, a prefigurement of Jesus, blessed both Jacob and Esau. If you honor Jacob's blessing, even though it was lifted up above that conveyed to Esau, it's still a blessing. You have to honor Esau's blessing as well. But first, dealing with Jacob. Isaac said, "Let people serve thee, Jacob, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord," did you get it? "Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee." And consequently, Gabriel's inspiration of Muhammad, being a descendant of Esau, gave him the license to bow to Jacob and to submit himself to Jacob, because the blessing, as I reiterate, was, "Let thy mother's sons bow down to thee." Rebekah, Isaac's wife, only had two sons, Jacob and Esau. And their children afterwards were supposed to give obeisance to Jacob's star. Thusly, if I may paraphrase and take you to Micah chapter 5, and I'm quoting this from memory, "Gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. Now he hath laid siege against us, but they shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. But thou, Bethlehem Ephrathah," a representation of Jesse, who was the son of Jacob, "but thou, Bethlehem Ephrathah, out of thee shall he come forth unto me, that is to be ruler in Israel." Consequently, he has to be the one that receives obeisance, "whose going forth have been from old, even from everlasting. And the remnant of his brethren," that's the disciples, "shall return unto Jacob. And he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. For now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth." This is the fruition of that text. Such is a demerit to that received by the morning star. Christ promotes the house of David, but in this order of honor, Muhammad cannot complain. Even as Gabriel's ministerial deputy, he cannot, because Jesus cannot. Remember, Jesus' beacon of light, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, must also honor Jacob. Why should not Gabriel's faithful bow to Jacob's ordination as well? This is our insight by Zechariah's torment. "True indeed, shall not Esau's bludgeoning sword be strapped to David's thigh." Thus does Revelation 7's sealing angel command the hurting angels to hurt not until after the seal. In this vein does meekness and righteousness win the day, and Father is honored. Jesus so warned all who may now covet this hour of honorarium. Making reference to Matthew 24, verses 45 through 47. We likewise concede the fruition of Jacob's honorarium. In fact, as we're going to read, Esau repined that Jacob was a thief, a supplanter. Therefore, Jesus, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. Be thou Lord over thy brethren. Let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is thy servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. Continuing a little longer in the pronouncement of blessings on Jacob and Esau. Genesis 27, verse 36. And he said, is not he rightly named Jacob? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? How darest therefore, if Isaac did have a reserved blessing, how shall we ignore it? And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, behold, I have made him thy Lord. And all his brethren have I given to him for the servants. And with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I do now unto thee, my son? Verse 38, and Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Verse 39, and Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. Ergo, strap thy sword to your thigh. And shall serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Bringing this doctrine to its closure, the Islamic faith tells us that Muhammad ascended to heaven. This we must believe because his disciples do indeed successfully live by the sword. And they bask by the fat of the earth, a prefigurement of their vast supplies of petroleum. Beyond that, their land is mostly an arid and desert terrain, a place that is watered not from the earth, nor from the rain, but from the morning dew of heaven. Jacob, in the judgment, will employ their blessing by using their service. He will deploy Prophet Muhammad's austere Gabrielic fervor against idolatry. Thus does David exclaim, gird thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty, with thy glory and thy majesty. History shows that many nations submitted to Muhammad and to Islam by this very austerity, that which they learned from Gabriel. The Father doesn't want Gabriel to establish his kingdom. He wants he that embraces the truth through meekness and righteousness to carry forward his banner. Marvelously, this fervor of Gabriel is included in Jacob's gospel strength. In this way, the fairest of the sons of men shall bring peace on earth, the land of Oblivion. This lesson we learn from Zechariah's Gabrielic encounter. And with that, I bring the study to a close.